Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make biscuits two ways. We are going to make a pumpkin biscuit and then our classic sourdough biscuit. So we'll have a nice sweet biscuit that will be great with some honey and butter. And then a savory biscuit because we're also going to be making some omelets, bacon, and sausage. So just a yummy, late kind of brunchy. So let's start by getting our bacon cooked up for our bacon. What we're using it for is just eating it. So the other day I made some bacon. I don't know what we made bacon with. What did we make? Oh, these lovely, delicious butternut squash vegetable medley, which was so good. The bacon was so good. And I made extra in it. So since this bacon is so long, I'm actually just going to cut it right down the middle so that we have some more manageable pieces. And then I'm going to separate it. We'll start frying this up. And then I'm going to mince up an onion real quick to start sauteing. And then, well, I'll wait on that because I'll do that after we make our biscuits. But the bacon always takes a hot minute to cook up. So I'm going to take it apart and we'll let it start to get crispy. Here we go. And we're going to make, so our two biscuits that we're making today will have just a regular pumpkin biscuit with, I'll have some cinnamon in it, a little bit of brown sugar, so slightly sweetened. And then we'll make our just classic sourdough biscuit. Okay, let me wash my hands. Let's get this heating up over. And do it over like a medium heat here. There we go. And let's start working on our biscuits here. Okay, so we're going to do two different bases, but we're essentially using the same ingredients in most of them. So for my regular biscuits, we're going to add in, and I'm just making a half batch of both of these so that we'll end up with a full through. For the sourdough biscuits, we're going to use a cup of all-purpose flour. For the pumpkin biscuits, we are going to use a cup and a third. And that's because the sourdough biscuit's going to have starter in it, which actually gives it a little bit more of a flour base. So a cup and a third for the pumpkin and a cup for the regular ones. Here we go. Slide this guy out of the way. And remember, this is the pumpkin. So in order for me to remember that, I'm going to put my brown sugar in there so I have a visual cue, because otherwise I will forget. So we're going to put in 2 tablespoons of brown sugar into the pumpkin one. So it will have slightly sweetened. As I drop a teeny bit in there, move it over there. And then we're going to add also a teaspoon of cinnamon to the pumpkin one. But they're not going to be like an overly sweet biscuit, but they'll be sweet enough, but they'll be great with butter and a little drizzle of honey. We're going to do a teaspoon of cinnamon. And now I can visually see which one is which. And then each one of our biscuits are going to have a half a teaspoon of salt in it. There we go. And then we're going to use our baking powder. Our pumpkin ones are going to have 2 teaspoons of baking powder. 1, 2. And our regular ones are going to have 1.5 teaspoons. Here we go. And then we're going to use some baking soda as well. We're going to use about 1/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda in our regular ones. Got to get it kind of measured out right here. Not quite. There we go. And then we're going to use a half a teaspoon of baking soda in our pumpkin ones. And now we've got our dry base for both of our biscuits here. I'm going to go in with my little pastry cutter here, and we're going to give it a good swirl. And then we're going to cut our butter into it. And I'm going to use 1/4 cup of butter in each one, which is 1/2 stick in here, because again, we are making 2 half batches.
Yeah, question. How was the blood orange chicken last time?
Oh, it was so delicious. I feel like it's now the way I have to make my orange chicken every single time. It gave it a really cool color, but the flavor was just wonderful. And I did use a couple clementines in it, but it was really, really good. Even my daughter, who came home like later, she was like, "You saved me dinner, right?" And I was like, "Yep, there's some food there." And she was like, "Oh, this is good. This is really good. This is better than the one I normally make." So I got her seal of approval. Let's give these a little toss here. There we go. I will say the bacon smells delicious. Okay, let me get a little knife here, and I'm going to cut my butter, and we're going to put in a 1/2 cup, or not a 1/2 cup, 1/4 cup of butter, which is 1/2 stick in each one. I'm going to cut them up, and then I'm going to use my pastry cutter to cut it into the mixture, and then we'll make our wet mixture that we'll press and fold into it. So I like to cut them down the middle through in fourths, and you want to make sure you're using nice and cold butter so that it goes in there easily. So just take it right out of the fridge right when you're about ready to use it. There we go. And then we'll do the same with this one. I'm going to cut it down the middle, and this is just going to allow it to incorporate a little bit easier into our flour instead of having to try to slice up the whole big one with our pastry cutters. There we go. And then I'm going to give each one a little bit of a toss here. And then I'm going to start with our plain mixture, and then we'll go into our other one. And we're just going to cut it into it until all of our butter chunks are no bigger than a pea for it. Now, you could always use a food processor for this or 2 knives, but I feel like a pastry cutter does a great job, and it doesn't really take that much effort. Now, I'm going to take my knife here, and we're just going to get any butter clumps that have stuck between the blades out. There we go.
Can you go over real quick what you're making?
So I'm making biscuits 2A. So we're going to make a lovely pumpkin biscuit that will be slightly sweetened with some brown sugar and cinnamon. And then we're making our classic sourdough biscuit. And then we're going to make some omelets and sausage and bacon. So just kind of a really simple brunch here. Okay. Now we're going to start cutting up our butter into our next one. But before we do that, I'm going to come over to our bacon here. I'm going to turn it down now to about a 4. Now that it's started to sweat out a lot of its fat. And we'll fry it up on a slightly lower temperature. That way it gets nice and crispy. There we go. Okay, let's cut our butter into this is our spiced mixture. That is going to be for the pumpkin ones. There we go. Now, I use cinnamon. You could also, if you want a little bit more of a kick of a spice, you could use pumpkin pie spice in there to give a little bit more flavor. But I love just the plain cinnamon as well. I think it really goes well with the honey when you drizzle a little bit of honey on our biscuits. Okay. And again, just kind of cut your butter into where you don't have any pieces bigger than a pea, because if you have really big chunks of butter, what will happen is you'll get little butter pockets in your biscuits. And then when it melts while it's baking, you'll have a void. And it just kind of messes with the texture of it. Okay. This looks like it's done. I'm just going to cut out or take out any little bits that have stuck between my blades here. Okay. Now I'm going to grab out 2 little bowls here so that we can make our 2 wet mixtures to add in. So for our sourdough mixture, we are going to use a half a cup of sourdough discard. So I fed up my sourdough, so I put my discard in a little thing to use. So a half a cup of our discard. Here we go. Making sure I get it all out.
Do you have a question? How long can you keep your discard in the fridge before it gets bad?
So if it's, I would say in the fridge, you've got about 10 days before it kind of gets a little thing, as long as it's airtight, because that's how long it kind of takes if you have your starter in the fridge between feeding it. So I would say about 10 days. You can also freeze your discard and then just de-thaw it when you're ready to use. So we've got a half of cup of our sourdough discard in here. And then we're going to add in our half and half. So we're going to add in a 4th cup of half and half. That's my 4th. Here's my 4th one. And then, here we go.
And can you go over what discard is?
Discard is your sourdough starter that when you're ready to feed it, you get rid of some so that you're not creating a huge amount of starter. And starter is what you use to make sourdough bread. Okay, we've got our 4th cup of our discard in here. I'm going to just give our bacon a little bit of a toss here. Flip it over. There we go. I always just like to stir it every so often so it doesn't get too kind of cooked up here. Okay. And then for our pumpkin ones, we're going to put in a half a cup of our half and half over here. So this is our 4th of a cup, and I'm just going to do it. And then I'm saving a little bit. I have a little bit of extra half and half in here that will brush over the top of our biscuits. So a half a cup in there. We have a 4th of a cup in our regular ones. We're going to add a 3rd cup of pumpkin puree. This is for our pumpkin biscuits. And grab a little spoon here. And just scoop it in here and kind of measure it out. Now again, this is a small batch of biscuits, so we're not making a huge batch of each one. So they're kind of a half batch, which is going to give us around, 5, maybe 6 biscuits each. So we got our 3rd cup of pumpkin puree in here. And we're going to give these a quick little mix. And then we will add them into our biscuit mixtures in there. But you just want to make sure you dilute the pumpkin into that half and half. And then the same thing, I'm going to dilute the starter into the half and half. That way it will be easily mixed in there, because we don't want to, when we add it in, we don't want to over mix our biscuits. We want them to be like a dry shag, and then we'll do our press and fold. Okay. There we go. Perfect. Let me add these guys over, and we'll do our pumpkin in here. So we're just going to pour this mixture in, and then we're just going to toss it until a dry kind of shag forms so that we can do our little press and fold. So don't really stir it. You don't want it to go pasty, but leave it like a shag, just like that. And now we're going to do the same thing with our sourdough mixture. And give it a nice little kind of toss until this nice kind of dry shag forms. And this is going to be the base of it. And we'll do our little press and fold to hold them together. Okay, let me kind of pull this off. I'm going to dump this whole thing out. And so you're going to see it's going to be pretty dry and shaggy, which is what you want, because pressing and folding the mixture together is going to give you those wonderful flaky layers. Let's get our bacon here real quick. Toss it over. Beautiful. That's why I said you got to start the bacon, because it takes, when you're doing the crazy like pan fry on it, definitely takes much longer to cook up. Okay. So don't knead it. What you're going to do is you're going to press, so push it down, and then you're going to fold these edges up on top of each other. And this is going to create a layer. So every time you fold this up, you're creating these wonderful flaky layers in your biscuit, just like with a scone on here. So just take these dry crumbs and fold them up. Don't knead it, or you're going to get rocks instead of biscuits. So you see how we're just kind of combining them together by just pressing and folding. And then just take those dry crumbs on the sides and just sprinkle them on top. And now we're going to just press it out to about an inch or so thickness. And then we'll be able to cut our first batch of biscuits. There we go. And try to roughly make them all around the same height. Otherwise, they won't bake up so evenly. Okay, I've got about a 3-inch biscuit cutter here so we can make some nice big biscuits.
You have a question. Is scone dough similar to biscuit dough?
Yes. Scone dough is very similar to biscuit dough. I will say the primary difference between the two is scones are much sweeter. So they use a little bit more sugar in them. But yes, you kind of do the press and folds the same way. You kind of press and fold that bit together. It'll be a little bit of a Frankenstein one. But I do like a nice big biscuit, so versus smaller ones. Let's see. And I will say anywhere you have, like where you've kind of pushed those edges together there, when it bakes up, it kind of pops apart and gives it a little bit of a Frankenstein look to it. But still tastes the same. So we've got 5 good 3-inch size biscuits. And I have enough here to, like what I say, make a little jack biscuit. So I'm going to just press and fold it a couple of times, and then I'll shape it. And that's just going to hopefully allow it to stay together a little bit, because it's, again, got those little scraps. So there's our little jack biscuit right there. Now I'm going to wash my hands so I don't put any pumpkin mixture into my next one. And we're going to do our press and folds and do the exact same thing with it. And then we're going to brush all of them with cream. And our pumpkin ones, we are going to sprinkle a little brown sugar on them so they have a nice kind of sweetened crust on the top. Okay, so here is our sourdough biscuit. And again, we have this nice kind of lovely dry shag here. And you don't want your mixture to be too wet, or you're not going to get those nice flaky layers. These are not drop biscuits, but they are cutout biscuits. So we're going to do our press and folds into it. And again, every time you press this dry crumb into the mixture, that's what creates those lovely flaky layers. Here we go. And this is also why you need to use cold butter versus a like room temperature butter, because the cold butter is going to help create those flaky layers, where room temperature butter is going to create more of a like a harder biscuit. Okay, I'm going to push this guy out now, and we'll start cutting our biscuits here. And then we'll kind of do our Frankenstein shape.
Do you have a regular recipe for biscuits without sourdough?
I do. I haven't made them in a while, but I used to make them all the time until I started doing my little sourdough journey. So I'll have to whip it out because they were really, really good biscuits. I have them written down, so I'll have to go find it because I haven't made them in years, but they were delicious. But you can see these are our nice flaky layers. They got a little pumpkin on there from our first set of biscuits, but we're going to pop these here, and I'm going to kind of cut it out. And let's kind of get a little push and a fold over here. Let's see if we can make 2 more biscuits out of this. But you can see the pumpkin gives you just a little bit more because that pumpkin has just a slightly bit more of a base. And we'll press and fold. Again, don't knead your dough together. And the point of the pressing and folding is to really create those flaky layers. Okay, see if I can fold these. Now, the ones that are kind of like scraps pushed together, I call, are a little bit more of a Frankenstein biscuit because they will pop apart when you bake them. And then I'll make a little jack biscuit here.
And do you have these recipes posted anywhere?
I upload all of our lives to the link on our page, so you can always recreate our recipes from rewatching the lives. But my regular sourdough biscuit, I believe I actually have a recipe card that we gave out to everyone. But I might make our pumpkin biscuit a recipe card this week. Here's our little tiny jack biscuit. Let me wash my hands. That is a very little baby biscuit. Very cute. And we will brush our half and half on them and then sprinkle our like regular ones with some sugar. But let me toss our bacon here. We're getting close to it being done. Just want to make sure those white fattier pieces are submerged and hitting the pan. Thicker bacon always takes a little bit longer to cook up, but you want to make sure you get it to that nice crispy level or it gets a bit chewy.
And do you guys ever eat out?
Yes, we do. We're actually eating out dinner tonight. We eat out about once a week or so, just depending on, our schedules and whatnot. When tournament season happens up, we tend to eat out a lot more because we're stuck at, the soccer fields all day or we're away traveling. But again, we try, to eat out once a week or pick up kind of like, a fast food or whatnot on there. But tonight we're going to go out to eat. And then we have a soccer game that we're going to. So we'll also have to have concession foods, which I love. Okay, we've got our half and half brushed over it. And then for our pumpkin biscuits, to give them just a little extra sweetness, we're going to sprinkle a little brown sugar over the top of them. You don't need much. We'll probably use less than, a teaspoon or so for these biscuits all together. And you can use regular sugar or even cinnamon sugar works really well. And then our plain biscuits, I like to leave plain, keep them nice and savory. That way, for those who want to have the bacon on their biscuits or a sausage, or I like to put an omelet on my biscuit, is delicious. Okay, let's go pop these guys in the oven, and then we'll be ready to take our bacon out here in just a second. Slide that right there.
What's your favorite pumpkin dessert you make?
You know what? It's probably going to have to be a pumpkin muffin, a pumpkin cheesecake muffin. I really love pumpkin bread and pumpkin muffins. Pumpkin scones. I do love my pumpkin scones. I do not like pumpkin pie. And so I'm going to add the timer on here at 400 for 15 minutes. So I always have to say it's going to be either pumpkin bread or pumpkin muffin because it's so delicious. Although earlier this week, my older daughter convinced me to go get crumble cookie because even though I make all this amazing baked goods up there, she just loves crumble cookie. And so, we got it. And then they had this pumpkin little cake in there and I had to get it. It was so good. I was like, ooh, I haven't done a pumpkin cake in a while. Maybe I'll do pumpkin cupcakes with a nice kind of cream cheese frosting on it, which I love. But I just love that just nice pumpkin-y flavor. Let me grab a paper plate, not a paper plate, a plate so we can put paper towels on it. And we're going to take out our bacon, and that way it can kind of crisp up and get nice and crunchy. We've got a couple pieces that are ready, and then a couple that still need a few more minutes to fry up. Here we go. But you always need to put your bacon out on like a paper towel to absorb up that extra fat, or it will get kind of really chewy and doesn't get as crispy. Okay, we'll let those sit just a little bit longer. And while we do that, let's saute up our vegetables for our omelets. So I'm going to turn on my pan here, start letting it warm up. And then once we take, we're going to mince up. I'm not going to use quite this whole onion here. I'm just going to use about half of it for our omelets. I'm going to pour a little bacon grease in our pan, and we'll saute up our vegetables in bacon grease, which will add just a lovely flavor. Okay. These are looking good. So I'm going to pour a little bacon grease over here. And I'll let that guy sit just a little bit. We're going to fry up our sausages in the bacon grease. That's my kids' favorite way to have sausages because it gives them this nice little crunchy crust on the outside of the sausage and just makes them so much more flavorful. Here we go. So I'm going to turn this guy down low. We'll add our sausages in just a second, but we've got our bacon all nice and ready. And then I'm going to just kind of do a small little mince up of our onion. I find that cooking up your vegetables before putting them in an omelet just gives them such a better flavor and texture, because omelets, if you just throw in the raw vegetable, they don't ever really cook the vegetable. They just warm it up. And so you'll have that more of that raw, bitter flavor to it. So just doing a quick saute on the vegetables is going to give you so much more flavor. Okay, let's get this cooking up. And then we're going to throw in our bacon. Keep your heat nice and low because that bacon grease is already, not your bacon, our sausages, but that bacon grease is already hot. You can use raw sausages. I'm using pre-cooked because I always have these, but either one works for them. The pre-cooked ones just need less time for it. There we go. The bees make them taste so much better. That's always, my kids love it when we go camping because I always are cooking like the sausages in the bacon grease, and they're like, it's the best. Here we go. And let me wash my hands. Okay, let's get this guy cooking up, and then I'm going to mince up some peppers here because we're going to throw in some peppers with our, just keeping it really simple. In our omelet, we'll have onions, peppers, a little bit of green onions, and then I'm keeping my meat separate so that my kids can put it on their biscuits if they want to. Here we go. Let those cook up. So just doing, halfway there to a Denver omelet. So we'll have our peppers and onions and green onions. To make it all the way there, you just add in some ham. Here we go. And I'm going to do my peppers. I'm using sweet peppers because I think they have a slightly nicer flavor than a bell pepper, less bitter. I'm going to just dice them up nice and small like our onions as well. And then we're going to use just some triple cheddar blend for our omelets, although you can really use any cheese under the sun in your omelet. Just preference. My kids love a cheddar cheese omelet or Gouda. Gouda makes a great omelet. Okay, we've got those. And then I'm just going to use one green onion. Here we go. We're going to mince these up. And then I'll throw my green onions last, but I do want to get a nice little saute on them for it. Okay, let's turn this guy up just a smidge now that we have all the sausages in there. go. And cooking the vegetables in that bacon grease is going to give them just some more flavor than if you were to use just butter. So we're going to throw in our sweet peppers. We'll do our green onions in last because you don't want to overcook them or they don't hold their form as well. We're mixing in. Wonderful. And while we're waiting for those to saute up, let's whisk up our eggs here. So we're going to do an 8-egg omelet here. And for my kids, I never make individual omelets because that's a lot of work. I do one big omelet. I find my 10-inch pan makes the best results. If I try to do an omelet in the 12-inch pan, it is really hard to flip and get it folded over. So I go big, but within reason, you know. I've done it before, and then it's like you go and only it rips halfway through, so you can only kind of flip half of it, and so you kind of flip 2 halves. There we go. And now, when I typically do my scrambled eggs, I'll scramble them in the pan, but for an omelet, you do need to whip them so that they can just start cooking on that flat level. Wash my hands, got a little egg on them. I'm going to grab my fork. I'm going to pop each yolk here. And then we're going to whisk these guys up. And now you just want to make sure all of your yolks have been mixed into your egg whites. But you don't have to get out a whisk and really whip them. Here we go. Okay, let's give these. Onions are starting to caramelize.
Does your husband ever cook?
He has cooked a few times. We call his meals more like Papa Bear meals, which is what can you heat up in the toaster or serve raw. I do all the cooking because I really enjoy cooking, and
I'm more like a Megan Mark.
Yes, he's an assembly. He will put together a charcuterie for you, aka just cheese and crackers and some sliced meat. But his kitchen skills, and he's always like, "Oh, you need to teach me how to cook," and I'm like, one day we will. Let me grab a bowl and some garlic salt. He did once make me this cake, and I made the frosting for the cake. And the only thing that was edible about that was the frosting. I will say he tried. And it looked beautiful. It was very flavorless. Here we go. Okay. But I will say he tried to make the cake completely from scratch. He didn't do a box mix. So, it turned out looking pretty. Okay, let's add in our green onions here. Then we're going to add in a little bit of garlic salt. I'm going to turn. Our sausages are almost done here. This will be kind of our base for the inside of our omelet. You can definitely throw in some meat if you want to. I'm going to put in just a little bit of garlic salt, season up those vegetables, give them a nice flavor. Here we go. Beautiful. They've got this nice oniony smell. And I'm going to turn this all the way down. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our veggies out. And you don't need to saute them long. We're going to put them in our bowl because that's what we're going to put in the middle of our omelet. But I'm going to put some cheese on top of that. That's going to help the cheese start to melt and just makes it so much better on there. So it gets this process started. So I'm just going to kind of cover this whole mixture with a little bit of our cheese. We're going to throw in a little bit more, but this is going to help it start to melt. Before I put my egg in here, let's get a little bit of butter. There is a bit of residual bacon grease in here, but I always like to use a little bit of butter in my omelet. Let's let it come to melt. Let's check out our sausages here. They are looking good. We've got this nice crispy edge on both sides. So I'm going to take these off. Let's move our bacon over. And I always like to put my sausages also on my paper towel just to absorb up any of that extra grease. There we go. So we've got our bacon and our sausage done. Beautiful. Now, if you wanted to add another layer, you could fry up some potatoes in this bacon sausage grease, which is delicious, or you could fry up eggs in there. Okay, we've got this. Let me sprinkle a little bit of salt into our omelet base because I always like to season up our eggs. Again, we had 8 eggs in there, so I put about, a half a teaspoon. Give it a quick mix, and then we're going to pour this all the way in. Now, I make my omelets. There's a couple methods you can use to do omelets. I don't do the put the lid on the top omelet and let it cook. I do, after a while, I scoop up the sides, I tilt my pan, and I let the top of the egg run around the sides. This helps prevent the bottom of my omelet from getting too browned, and I feel like it just gives it a better flavor.
You have a question. Could you put the eggs in the pan with the grease?
You could, but you would want to take out some of that grease because that's a lot of grease. I find that using too much bacon grease can make a really greasy and omelet or scrambled eggs. So even when I'm like campfire cooking, I will only use a little bit of it. So we did pour a couple, like 2 tablespoons of bacon grease in here when we were sauteing the vegetables. So there is some bacon grease in there. You just don't want to use all of it because it does make it a bit greasy. Okay, we've got these over 4. And so you see, you want to use a really thin spatula, but you're just going to slide it up as it goes and you're going to cook it here. But it needs to firm up enough for you to do it, to slide your under. But using a non-stick pan, you see how you can just lift up the top there. And what I do once I've got a nice base layer through it, I will lift up those bits and then tilt my pan to pour it under there. And I find that just makes a really delicious you get that nice little kind of flavor of cooking it on the direct pan versus putting the lid on it gives you a more of a spongy egg base to it. So I'm going to turn this guy up to about a 4. I don't like to cook my eggs too high of heat on here. And then I'm going to just go around just like this all the way around, and we kind of just lift it up and we put that egg mixture underneath it. That prevents the bottom of my egg of the omelet from getting too browned or burnt. And then it allows it to cook all the way through. And don't worry if you end up accidentally tearing your omelet, lifting it up. When you pour that new egg mixture over it, that's just going to fill in any rips. There we go. And we'll slide that around. We'll let that sit, let that next layer kind of cook up, and then we'll do it all the way around. Let me just take a peek over here. Oh, good. We'll be getting our biscuits. I almost called them scones out here in 30 seconds. Which will be perfect timing because we are almost done forming the base of our omelet here. And also throwing this egg into the pan that we sauteed up those vegetables are going to give us a nice kind of residual flavor. I'm going to turn this down nice and low while we walk over there and grab our biscuits. We have our pumpkin biscuits and our buttermilk, or not our buttermilk, our sourdough biscuits. Now, any of the ones that we didn't cut from the first round that we had to push together will be kind of like a Frankenstein biscuit, which means they'll pop apart in slightly different ones. But looks like we didn't get too many Frankenstein ones here, but look at that. You can see the big pops on there and these flaky layers. And again, that is from the press and fold, which makes them so delicious. Here we go. We'll let them cool for just a second. But I will say the sourdough ones really come out, but look at all of those flaky layers there. Just gorgeous. This one so much that it kind of popped out. And then you can see them here, even on our pumpkin. Pumpkin one has a slightly higher moisture, but you can see those lovely flaky layers in there. Okay, let's get this omelet show on the road. As you can see, we have almost no liquid egg left. So I'm just going to go through, and then I just gently scrape the top of it just to get all of that up, because I don't like to have a kind of a runny, snotty inside of my omelet. I like it to be as firm as possible, but I don't want it to be sponged up. Okay, we've got this down low. We're going to add our base layer of cheese on the bottom. And you just do 1/2 of it. And then this is our sauteed vegetables where our cheese has already started to melt. And we're going to place this on that kind of that half on top of that cheese as well. Here we go. Beautiful. And then we're going to take this and we're going to flip it up over. And this is going to make our beautiful omelet. And you're just going to let that sit there and cook for about 30 seconds on that residual heat. I turn it off, but having it doing this way, starting that pre-melt on it is already going to give you that lovely kind of that cheese melt in there. And then you can take, and you can see where we put the new egg under here. You have less browning versus the very center where it's hard to kind of get that new egg under it. So it gives you these nice, delicious layers here. But guys, it is time to serve up. So let me grab a plate here.
Question, are you guys doing another live today?
So we are, based on our schedule, we're going to do like a late night live tonight. So I've got to get a couple prepped up for this kids' lunches this week. And then we'll do, I think I'm going to make bagels tomorrow, which means I'm going to prep that up tonight. Bagels or English muffins. I haven't done that, but I think I might do bagels for lunch tomorrow. So I'm going to prep that up tonight as well as some treats for our kids. But let's get ours served. Let me get some soft butter here and a little drizzle of honey for our pumpkin biscuits. Okay, and a plate because we need to serve it on a plate. Okay, so for brunch today, we are going to have our omelet. And so I don't ever take the whole omelet out. I just kind of cut a section here. And then this is what we kind of serve up onto our kids. So they get individual omelets, but you can cut it in a nice little section here. So we've got our sauteed veggie and cheese omelet. And then we're going to have it with some sausage and our nice thick bacon. And then we have our pumpkin biscuit. Look at that. Nice, beautiful, flaky layers in there. We're going to put a nice little bit of butter on it. And then get a little bit more butter. Who skimps on butter on a biscuit? And then a little drizzle of honey for a nice sweetness to our biscuit. And then we will serve it also with one of our amazing flaky sourdough biscuits. And what I like to do is sometimes you can put your omelet inside your biscuit and it makes a really delicious breakfast sandwich. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can go to that link and search for what we made. So we've got our biscuits two-way, our pumpkin biscuits and our sourdough biscuits, plus our omelets and bacon and sausage. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my Hex-Clad pans in there, my spatulas, my Nordic ware baking sheets, all the different gadgets I use in my kitchen. I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.